Welcome to the Portland Culinary Podcast and Portland Culinary Radio. I'm Steven Shomler, your host. We're here in Bozeman, Montana, one of our Bozeman on-the-road centric episodes, or Bozeman-centric on-the-road episodes. If you want to go to adventuresinbozeman.com, you can see all of my Bozeman content, be it beer podcast, culinary podcast, and travel content. I'm so excited. Gin for breakfast, as you know, my listeners know, that's a thing I love. As my Instagram story followers know, I try to limit myself to gin before noon and then everything else after 12 o'clock. And I'm going to get whiskey, and I'm going to get a great story, and I'm going to get to meet the founding head distiller at Dry Hills Distillery. Brooks Marshall, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Steve. Thanks.
Okay, so questions we ask. We're going to a lot of cool stuff. I'm excited to talk about the periodic table of elements and all kinds of crazy things because you are like crazy smart. But questions ask everybody in all my podcasts, where were you born?
I was born in Laramie, Wyoming.
And where'd you go to high school?
At Laramie High School, the only one in town.
And what was the mascot?
We were the Plainsmen and the Lady Plainsmen.
All right. It sounds like, I think, Evergreen High School in Vancouver in our neck of the woods. I think I got that right. If I got that wrong, forgive me, Evergreen people. Okay. And when did you move to Bozeman?
So I moved here in 2010.
Why'd you come to Bozeman?
Oh, I came here to go to graduate school at Montana State.
Oh, man, the best school in Montana, right?
I like to think that way. I had just finished a bachelor's degree in chemistry at Utah State University, and I applied to several grad schools, and they invited me to come up and told me they'd pay for my gas if I wanted to drive. And I came down Gallatin Canyon into Bozeman right in the evening, and the light was beautiful, and I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to maybe just end up here.
People don't understand, haven't been to Bozeman. You know, I love Portland, and I love the Portland area. I plan to stay there. But there are two places I've visited, you know, since I've started what I've been doing in January 1, 2012, that I could live. Just two. And Bozeman is one of those two. It is just so phenomenal here.
It's a great place. I love it. And, you know, I spent my time when I was in grad school talking about how am I going to figure out how to stay here? And it worked out that I got to get involved in this cool project.
Okay, and tell me again what you went to grad school for?
So it was in chemistry.
Chemistry. Gosh, you know, hats off to you. I struggled with chemistry in high school. Just had a hard time with it. The periodic table of elements, I didn't like it. And I thought I was being funny, and I said the UR was urine, and the teacher did not like that at all. I got in trouble.
Yeah. It's when you really start making too many periodical table jokes, then you become a nerd.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the best periodic table I ever saw was the periodical table of Marvel superheroes. Now, that I liked.
There you go.
Okay, so what year did you start here?
We started this project in earnest here in 2015.
So you opened in 2015. Started distilling.
Yes. Yeah.
And you were here then?
Yes.
Okay, and when did you, so what prepared you to be a distiller at a distillery? There's a lot of cool stuff in your background. Tell me some of the stuff that prepared you.
Oh, well, I spent time as a chemist, like I said, and as an undergrad, I did some research in synthetic inorganic chemistry in a kind of niche way. But I made complex mixtures, and then I had to separate them out. There were parts I wanted and parts I didn't want, and sometimes how I separated things was by distillation. And so I got to get some theoretical knowledge there, and then as a grad student, I studied sort of how liquids and vapors interact in some pretty exotic ways, but that's fundamentally what distillation is, you know, vapor and liquids going back and forth and how you purify along that road. So I had a lot of theoretical knowledge, and I had some practical knowledge, but it was still a learning experience to come and try and do it this way, but I at least had tools in my toolbox when we started.
Yeah, I kind of think of, you know, home brewers that become professional brewers that don't go to brewing school. They sometimes miss out some of what they would learn had they gone to professional brewing school, where they may know if I do this, this happens. But in brewing school, you learn some of the science behind it. I have a friend, Tomas, who's an incredible brewer, and he knows the science cold. Oh, man, he knows the science. And, you know, he acts probably like I've heard, you know, you're Jeff here with Dry Hills Distilling. You know, they probably both act dumb as foxes. But, like, don't mistake, you know, of everything I heard of Jeff, he's a very wise man. Same thing with Tomas. And I think knowing that science, as long as you don't lose your creativity and your artistic edge, I think is really, really important.
Absolutely. It helps me solve a lot of the problems that I have here, you know, because I can say, okay, this is misbehaving, but why? And then be able to take apart some of the underlying things. And it's helped me gain better practical skills, but it makes a good foundation to have the theoretical knowledge.
Okay, so where did your, I asked brewers where their beer journey began, but for you, where'd your drinking journey begin?
I really started drinking in high school, which, don't tell my mom.
I would never.
But I was living in Laramie, Wyoming, which is just outside of Fort Collins, and
So it's 90 miles from Fort Collins.
Yeah.
Somehow in my life, I've missed that close proximity geography-wise.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't know that, but a lot of people drive Interstate 80 across, and then you go a different road, and there's a 287 takes you short way. But we were near a lot of really great craft brewing going on, and so I grew up drinking Odell's beer and New Belgian beer, but we could also, have people that would go to their tasting room and bring back some of their weird stuff or their experimental stuff, and we got to try a lot of unique beers and different beers.
I'm blown away because a lot of brewers I've met, they literally started drinking beer in high school, which I find whatever. I think we should take the mystique out of beer for kids. My kids, I did that when they went to college. It wasn't such a shock, and they kind of were horrified. These kids getting drunk, like, don't you? Yeah, my dad told us years ago, and not a big deal. But you were not just drinking beer in high school; you were drinking craft beer, the good stuff.
Well, yeah, and so of course I had Natural Light and Keystone in my life too, but you only have to drink so much of that to know that it's not that great. And sure, it messes with your head, and that's sort of what you're trying to do. But all I had to do was get exposed to better beer and realize that I could have, the same, catch a buzz, which is what we were trying to do, and I could have a great taste in my mouth. And, I think I talk about this with our booze too, but I think it's the complexity of flavor, and that's what those guys were trying to do, and that was formative experience for me. Okay,
and another formative experience, if I remember and understand correctly, is when you left Wyoming, you went to Utah to school. There, if you buy a beverage, at the bar, you got to buy some chili to get, not very much of anything. But you can buy stuff at the liquor store.
Right.
You can buy bottles at the liquor store.
Right. And they still sell beer in the grocery stores, but it's 3.2 beer, and it's almost all mass market beer.
Yeah, 3.2% ABV.
Yeah. And so there's not a whole lot of fun in that, and it's even more watered down than mass market beer is otherwise. But you could go to the liquor store, and it opened up this place where I learned about other kinds of booze and learning about, what's a bourbon, and what's a rye whiskey, and what makes rum what it is. And then I'm a nerdy guy too, right? So I would drink these things or be at a party, and I'd try something, and then it would be like, the next day, look at Wikipedia to say, really all it means for it to be gin is it has some juniper in it. But there's so much other variety that you can get to. So that was probably where I really started learning about liquor in earnest, was because the beer scene was so terrible that I got to try it.
So one of the things that we can thank for the amazing spirits here at Dry Hills is Utah's horribly repressive alcohol laws.
Absolutely. And they have gotten better. When I moved there in 2006, they didn't even sell on Sundays. They do now. They've joined the modern era a little bit. And it was private clubs for members. If you wanted to go to a bar, you had to have a membership.
Oh, my goodness. Okay, so even though you started here in 2014 or 2015, you knew about this project early 2014, and you were on board. You're going to be part of the team, right? And we'll get into how you met Jeff. That's a fun story. But because of that, you got to go to Scotland, part of a distillery, before it even opened.
Right.
Tell me about that trip.
Well, it was a great opportunity for me. I was in graduate school, and we had a collaboration that was funded by the NSF in the U.S. and the EPSRC with our collaborator in Scotland. And part of what they wanted was for us to get cross-training. So there was a man from Scotland who came over and learned how to use the apparatus I was doing our research on, and then I got to go over there and do research on their apparatus. It was a great learning experience as a physical chemist, but I got to rent cars on the weekend and go out on my evenings and learn about what booze is like in Europe. And there was a couple of things that really were great to me. On my way to my bus stop home, there was a bar that was called The Botanist. It was a gin bar that had a menu that was pages and pages of gin. And so it was really great. I got to experience, what's a Dutch-style genever like, and what's a dry gin like, and then what are these botanical gins all about? And I kept a notebook while we were there of all the, I really like these things, or, ooh, that's maybe not so much my style. But it was in a exposure to gin in a way I never would have gotten living in Bozeman, Montana.
And that kind of prepared you for your journey to become a distiller.
Absolutely.
Because all those little things help, and they add up, and they contribute.
For sure.
Yeah, what does Augustine say? Travel is like a book, and those that don't do it read the same page over and over and over.
That's a good line. I've not heard that.
It's been a long time since he's been around, but he's a pretty cool dude. Okay, so tell me about how you met Jeff. Jeff and his wife Erica. They Dry Hills Distilling, and then just so people, since you're going to probably just mention it without thinking about it. Jeff owns a farm, not an insignificant farm, and you grow all the stuff that is here that you make your gin and your vodka and your whiskey with is grown on that farm or his brother's farm. And these are big farms, huge farms.
They're big in a lot of people's sense. We lease a lot of ground, and they're not big like Alberta farms, They're not.
Well, I probably don't even not smart enough to know about those, but I mean.
but they're for sure. They're big modern farming operations, and we put a very small dent in what they do production-wise. But the goal is that as we grow, we can start to take more of a share of that.
But he's got a farm, and he says, hey, I'm going to open a distillery. And 2014 is when you and him okay, I'm on the team. Jeff says you're on the team. Let's make it happen. But how did you meet him, and when did that happen?
Oh, I was dating a gal when she was living in Bozeman, and she was looking for a new place to live, and she rented a room in a condo, and I helped her move in, and it was like nobody else was there, and looking around, I was like, all right, well, okay, cool, I guess we'll see what this turns into. And then, I started going back over there, and I met Erica, and she was dating Jeff at the time. And, I would see him occasionally, and then we really started to hang out. And Jeff
So was Erica this gal's roommate?
Yes.
Okay, and what year was this roughly?
This would have been like 2011.
Okay.
Maybe late 2011.
Yep.
And, you just start hanging out, and I don't think I'd ever met anyone quite like Jeff before. He's like 6'8", and he was driving a truck with an 8-inch lift, and, just being a big, loud redneck, and I was into it. I say that with love. And they, almost as soon as I met them, they started talking about they were going to start a distillery. But, I've been talking about I was going to start a distillery with a friend of mine from Kentucky before at that time, too. But we didn't have the money or the dream.
When roughly were you talking about you were going to start a distillery?
It's like 2011. But I thought it was just a thing that you drink beer and talk about.
But you really did say to someone in 2011, let's start a distillery.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
That really happened.
Yeah. And I have a friend who was in graduate school with me who's from Kentucky. And we spent a lot of time as grad students talking about what you need in this world is the right idea. The rest of it will come. The marketing and the sales and all those things will come if you have the right idea and the right business plan. And we talked a lot about what were our skills and what were things that we knew, and whiskey was one of those. And we spent some time looking into what was involved in really trying to start a distillery, and decided that it probably wasn't going to be a thing that we could accomplish.
How phenomenal, though, that you put that into the universe, and then you end up being the founding distiller of an incredible distillery, making incredible spirits.
Absolutely. It's been great luck for me, And
I don't think it's luck. I think that's the way the universe works. I don't think there's coincidences. I think there's something else going on there, but...
Well, yeah, it's turned into a great thing, and it's, I've gotten a family that I didn't think I had before.
I love it. Okay, so just because it's fun, when you guys, so you're dating this gal, Erica's dating Jeff. You must have gone to some fun places. You probably didn't go much to Bozeman because you're more Manhattan, Churchill centric. Tell me about a couple of those places.
Oh, Erica was working a few shifts a week at the Legion in Manhattan.
The Legion Manhattan. Okay, so I have fallen in love with the Eagles in Bozeman.
Yep.
Is it similar?
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, it's wood floors and it's like names on the stools.
Oh, that's even better than Eagles.
We would go for bingo. I was like,
bingo's a big deal here.
Bingo is a big deal. Well, it's the whole Montana gambling thing, which is a different deal. We would go out for bingo nights, and it was a lot of the Dutch community is hanging out there, and but it's small town bar feel. You see the same people all the time, but it's not fancy small town bar feel. It's a little bit rougher around the edges.
Yep.
But it was great.
Okay, and then there was one other place.
Yes, so we would go to the Oasis a lot. And the Oasis is great food. It's actually called Sir Scott's Oasis. But it's good food, and
where's that at?
It's in Manhattan as well.
Okay,
just up the road from the Legion. But it's great cocktails, and it's a fun place to hang out, and it's just up the road from the home farm.
And how are the steaks there?
The steaks are fantastic. If you want a good steak while you're in the Gallatin Valley, I would go to the Oasis. And I'm sure there will be people that are offended that I'm not including their restaurant. Lots of great restaurants, but the Oasis is my favorite place for a serious steak dinner.
Well, and I love good food, but I also I like atmosphere and character and something different, that goes with it. You're like, wow, I can't believe that's why I love dive bars, because no offense, but vodka's vodka, and I love drinking a nice, 3 olive gin martini with the vermouth bottle waved over it in a really fancy, cocktail bar. I love that experience. I'm dressed up a little, and my wife's looking beautiful. She always says, that's fantastic. But I also love the same gin martini in the diviest of dive bars.
Well, and I'm not a high society person in general. I'm a little rougher around the edges, and I find that my people are in the dive bars. and I love craft cocktails, and I love to go to places that are going to serve fancy cocktails because I learn so much in those places. I get to drink booze I'd never have, and I get to have really talented bartenders make cocktails.
And then you go home and do research.
Yeah, and then I go learn about it because I can't help myself. But I have probably the most fun when I'm in a bar that's a little rougher around the edges.
Okay, so when you're a brewer or a distiller, you get to have some fun adventures. So tell me about some of the fun adventures you've had since you've been a distiller.
A lot of what's been fun for me is learning about how to be a mechanic in a distillery. It's equipment and it's motors and it's bearings and how to care for these things and how to take care of them. But also, what's maybe been the most fun for me is I've got to learn a ton about ag. And that's a unique position for where I am in that this distillery is so closely associated with the farm. But for the last few years, we've closed down production and I haven't made any booze, and I've gone and helped potato harvest.
For about a month.
Yeah.
And no, I've never heard of a distiller that has that experience.
And it's 6 days a week, and a good day is maybe 8 to 8. Long days maybe 8 to 10.
And when the potatoes need to come in, they need to come in.
Well,
so you don't want to lose them.
We're one of the last valleys in the country to plant, and we're one of the first to harvest because the climate here is so rough. Our winters are really long.
Yeah, Old Man Winter could arrive between October 1 and October 15th, but there will be snow on the ground before Halloween.
And when it's going to come,
right? Am I right?
Absolutely. And that snow can cut against you because you start freezing a potato, and once it's got that frozen spot, if there's too many of them, you'll rot the whole potato. And then when that starts happening in the cellar, one rotten potato gets on the next one, and those bacteria break it down, and it becomes a real big issue. And so 2 years ago, it was going to get really cold. It was going to be in the teens, and there was still 40 acres to go. And, 40 acres, if you're a grain farmer, doesn't sound like anything. It's like, dust off a combine and be done by noon. But potatoes, we had a lot of work to go. We did hundreds of trucks, but I did 6 a.m., to 2 a.m.
just to get the potatoes in.
And then slept for 4 hours and did it again the next day, 6 a.m. And we finished. We rolled the last ones in at about 3. And then it froze hard that night.
But you'd won.
But it was a win, absolutely.
And even though you were exhausted, I bet the feeling was amazing.
Absolutely.
And did you have steaks at Sir Scott's Oasis to celebrate?
We went to the Pony Bar, which if you want a divey bar, is the old Pony Bar. Pony's an old gold mining town that's on the other end of the valley, and there's not much left there, but there's a great small town bar there, and it's one of my favorite places in the world is the Pony Bar.
And what a fun thing to celebrate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No. And some people might think we're nuts, but I grew up, 160 acres, and I just some of that experience, and so it is fulfilling. Like we made it happen. We put the effort in.
Well, and it's the same thing here, and that's honestly maybe what I find so fulfilling about this job is I harvest every week, and especially with the culture around this business, it's that you work hard and that you reap those benefits. And it's great, farming, you get to see those benefits in the late summer and fall, and then you got to work all year for the rest of the year for it. Here, I get to plant and harvest every week, which I really like.
Okay, and I learned something today that I hadn't occurred to me. That kind of blew my mind. But, potato vodka, I assumed was made from potatoes. Because I assume that French fries are made from potatoes. I mean, you go to Hofbauer House or you go to Matt Brewing, they get their potatoes from Manhattan. Once you order them, they cut them then and fry them then. So 20 minutes earlier it was a potato, now it's on your plate as French fries. That's fantastic. That's great. They're not frozen, shuck out of a bag. No offense to people that do that. You told me that I learned today that some potatoes, or potato vodka, they rehydrate potato flakes.
So the majority of potato vodka is made that way.
That's like cheating.
It breaks my back to make potatoes out of whole potatoes because they're 80% water. So you get very little starch out of it. So I make 1,000-gallon cooks of potatoes, and I'll put 100 gallons of water in the bottom of the tank. And I heat it up till it's almost boiling, and then I start adding potatoes, and I add 6,000 pounds of potatoes out of 50-pound sacks to make that batch happen. And so
Wait, 6,000 pounds of potatoes gives you how much liquid in the end, roughly?
We'll make about 50 cases with that, maybe 60 if I have a good day at the
So I know
still.
barrels and kegs, but...
Yeah, so we're looking at...
Or put it in bottles or something.
Yeah, we're looking at 100 gallons,
Wow.
maybe less than that.
So
yeah.
6,000 pounds of potatoes for roughly 100 gallons of real, no-joke potato vodka.
Yep.
That blows my mind. Okay, and then I don't even want to ask this question. It terrifies me. Do you have to peel them first?
So we do.
Oh, no. Oh, my gosh. That's a nightmare. You got a whole bunch of poor kids there just peeling away.
No, we have a commercial peeler and a commercial dicer, and we were lucky enough to get a grant from the state of Montana that helped us pay for that. So it's a growth through ag grant that they give to businesses that are diversifying farms in the state. And so we have a big abrasive peeler. I can't imagine, it would be days to peel the potatoes you need. And I don't know if you know this, but as soon as you cut that peel...
Oh, you got to get it in water.
They start breaking up. And so once I have them peeled, they're in the water in less than 30 seconds.
Yep.
So I dice them, and then it's all food-grade belting straight into my mash cooker.
Yeah, a food cart in Portland called Potato Champ, a chapter in my first book. And he peeled potatoes and made them, this amazing, it's a potato food cart, French fry food cart, but his biggest expense was water because he had to use so much water to keep potatoes looking good and work them through, and he never expected that.
Yeah. Well, it's potato handling, for how much of a staple we think potatoes are, they're really a fragile, finicky thing. I see it in the harvest. When you're bringing them in, you can't let a potato drop more than about 8 inches or it'll bruise and it'll break down in storage over the winter. And so you really, from the field, from in the dirt when you dig them with the tractor, all the way to the cellar for the winter, and then all the way through the wash shed, and then through our place here, you've really got to baby them.
Wow.
And by the time they come to the distillery, they've seen hands probably 3 times, and more than one set of hands 3 times, and then I get to give them one final inspection as I dump them in. But
wow, that's incredible. Okay, you love being a distiller, don't you?
Yeah, I do. It really toots my horn. And I think some of it
it's always good to have your horn tooted, I'm telling you.
I like making stuff. I like seeing the fruit of my labor at the end of the day, and being a distiller lets me taste it at the end of the day, and I think that's even better.
And I suspect that for you, when someone really enjoys something you've made, that's also incredibly fulfilling, just like a chef.
It's the best compliment that I can get. When people come in and they tell me that they like our products, even if they're just being polite, it makes the hours or whatever just feel better.
Yep. Okay, and then this space is incredible. It's big, it's beautiful, it's big, but it feels warm. I bet it's warm in the dead of winter when it's 30 below, which is probably not easy, but I just get that sense that it probably is warm in here, right?
It is. I mean, I run a 2 million BTU boiler all day, so
that's
it stays
helpful.
warm. Yeah.
And you got windows. I can see to the distillery, and I've never seen a distillery. I'm sure they exist, but in my journey, Portland, they're a little bit smaller than this, and this is just beautiful. So you guys bought dirt? You bought this piece of property and it was just dirt.
Yep.
No building.
Yep. And we did a build to suit with a local contractor here. So we're good friends with our neighbors. They're an automotive shop. Well, he'll be mad if I call it just that, but they do a lot of custom work and are a special deal. But okay,
now tell me about the drain. The drain in there, you have a really cool drain. A lot of breweries have drains.
Yeah. And
there was something amazing. I looked down, and I'll put pictures, on the article that accompanies the podcast. What does it say on there?
We have a great big trench drain, and it has our name cut in every other grate, and it says Dry Hills Distillery cut in, and they have a big CNC table, and that was our
they cut it in for you.
gift that they cut in for us.
Oh, that's so great. And they cut it in for you.
Absolutely.
So if you need stuff like that done here in Bozeman, go see them, right?
Yep. Dark Horse Customs.
Yeah, and they have a really cool logo. I mean, I love their sign outside their building.
Yep.
Got my eye right away. Okay, so you built the building. When did construction start?
Would have been summer of 14.
And you were here to help, right, when the groundbreaking?
I was not. I was in Scotland when they broke ground on this building.
Drinking whiskey.
Yeah,
and
I was
said,
drinking
hey guys,
whiskey and
you build.
Calling Jeff on my calling card phone. Well, how's that going? You guys getting excited?
But I love it that you built the whole thing right then.
Yeah. Well, and it's like you don't want to have to go back and ask the bank for more money.
Yep.
But some of it is, these guys, Jeff and his brothers, feel like you need a shop. I need a farm shop, and they have huge shops that they can pull semis in and tractors and that kind of stuff.
And you can pull a semi-truck into your distillery.
Yeah, you could pull a semi-truck into the distillery. It's a tight squeeze. There's only ever been one semi in here.
I don't know if it's that tight a squeeze. I mean, I don't want. It's pretty beautiful back there. So
yeah, clean. So clean is important to me, and open space is important to me. I got a big forklift I drive around, but I want to know that I could get a truckload of grain tomorrow and have a place to put it. That's important to me.
Yep.
And we wanted this front space to feel like you're not crammed in on each other. There's something to be said about a hole-in-the-wall bar, but I'm kind of a big guy, and I talk with my hands, and I don't want to be worried about I'm going to bump into the table next to me. And so this space lets us, breathe, be open, which is nice.
So, and if people come here, based on, Montana, right now is very, in my opinion, my words, anti-capitalistic, anti-business toward brewers and distillers. It's just so shocking to me how awful they are to them. Call your representative, man. Do something about it. But people come here. And those are my words. Those are not yours. I own them as mine. Send your hate mail to me. Have your representatives call me. I'll take you on. But they can roughly, I'm speaking in rough terms, they roughly can, you're limited how many ounces you can sell.
Yep.
But they can have 2 whiskey drinks or 4 other kinds of cocktails. And you have an amazing cocktail menu. So people can come here, have a beautiful time, and they can buy a bottle or 2 and take them home.
Absolutely. And we'll tell you how we make the drinks. If you really have something you love, I'll sell you a bottle and tell you what go in the ingredients, and you can take it home and keep making them. We've got a little patio space, and it's just starting to be patio season now. So you come and have summer drinks and that's on the west side of the building, so you get the sunset light.
Oh, that's fantastic. Okay, let's drink 2 of your things. I've got this Dry Hills, it's Bin 7 white whiskey.
Wheat whiskey.
Wheat whiskey. Excuse me. I read it. I'm tired. Why Bin 7?
So the whiskey is predominantly wheat, and when we were talking about we needed a sample of grain to see what it cooked up like, doing the very first bit of testing, we went out and took grain from bin number 7. And, it wasn't even like, get an auger out. It was like we went out with a grain scoop and scooped a little up and put it in a gallon Ziploc bag and cooked it to see, what sort of conversion we could get, how much starch was in there. And then we had to name the product, and hemmed and hawed about historical names and this and that. And it was like, let's just go to where it came from. This is straight from Bin 7, and so we're going to call it Bin 7 Wheat Whiskey. So
I love the name. Okay, I'll drink it, and you tell us about the flavors from your perspective.
Okay.
There's not a right answer, but this is what you get out of it. Beautiful nose.
So often when I'm talking about this whiskey to people, it's a non-traditional, right? People think of American whiskeys as being corn. And that I've had people come in the tasting room and tell me you can't make whiskey if it's not made from corn. And this is...
Them was fighting words.
Well, this is a softer expression of whiskey. And I don't want to call it soft. It's a 90 proof whiskey, and it has bold flavors, but it's not aggressive in the same way that bourbon can be.
Let me put it this way: it's like a very beautiful woman that's very approachable and nice.
There you go. Yeah, it's the girl next door whiskey. Yeah,
the really nice looking girl next door who's very approachable and very nice.
Thank you.
Because this is fantastic whiskey and it's very approachable.
I appreciate it.
Because sometimes you have some whiskeys and then there's heat.
Right.
But then they go beyond the heat and there's that burn where it kind of hurts going down, and this doesn't have any of that.
And so the wheat really helps you be forgiving in that way. And it it brings in some of those a little bit bready flavors, and there's rye in here as well. So it's only 80% wheat, and then the rest is rye and barley. And the rye gives it just that little bit of spice, but I get notes of a little bit of like dried cherries, stuff like that. I also get vanilla and toffee. And so we actually do 2 types of oak in this whiskey. So we do American oak and we do French oak. And the French oak gives you some of those, I think, sweeter flavors that come out. And so this whiskey I'm pretty proud of when it comes out of the American oak barrels. But when you mix it or you put it in the French, it really comes out as something I like a lot.
So does it go from French to American, or does some in French and some in American and then comes together at the end?
It goes some in American and some in French comes together at the end.
And that's the same batch.
Yeah.
Batch. It comes out of the
Off the still.
Off the still. I almost said off the distill. It's like an idiot. But it comes off the still, same batch, and some goes in oak, some goes American oak, some goes in French oak.
Yep.
Then you bring it together because you want flavors from both.
Absolutely.
How did you think of that?
Well, we bought some barrels. So, it's amazing to me. You start a business, all the people that start calling you out of the blue. And there's a cooperage that got a hold of Erica and said, we got this deal on these... they're recoopered French barrels, and so they're new. They shave them and char them, and so she said, "Yeah, well, let's buy some of these," and didn't talk to anybody about it. And they showed up, and they were the most expensive barrels we've ever bought. 10-gallon barrels that cost $280 a piece.
Oh my gosh! Wait, did you say 10-gallon?
10-gallon barrels. But the whiskey that comes out of them is incredible. It's a really interesting. Different expression of what the whiskey can be. And we didn't know how cool it was going to be until we did it. And so it was a happy mistake, but it let us know what French oak can do.
Man, I keep waiting for because some whiskeys you get that burn and it just does. There's no heartache here. It's just all joy.
Yeah. I'm really, it's, I drink a lot of this whiskey, and granted I make it, so I probably ought to. But it's so approachable and it's so friendly. It's my everyday whiskey. And I love fancy whiskey too, don't get me wrong. But it's the kind of thing that I can come home at the end of the day and throw a couple of ice cubes in a glass and just drink whiskey.
But for me, it tastes like the really, really expensive whiskeys I've had. To me, this is a fancy whiskey. It's just super approachable and amazing. Like I said, this is the supermodel that's nice and kind and approachable.
You're pretty complimentary this early in the morning.
Well, I love me some good whiskey, and I'm really impressed. It's really nice. I love it. Okay. As much as whiskey is good, you got to start your morning with some gin if you're in my world.
It's before noon yet.
Okay. Oh, thank goodness. Okay, but I did break the rule for the whiskey. That's how good that whiskey was. Okay, Montana Abbey Gin. Where did the name come from?
So when Jeff and Erica were getting serious about starting this business, they went and took a course in Kentucky called Moonshine University that taught them a lot of stuff, but they met an old redneck on that trip who couldn't remember Erica's name and just kept calling her Abby. No, Montana Abbey, what are you guys doing tonight? And that name kind of stuck, and it was a joke for a while. But, I really like the way that name sounds, and the Abbey maybe has just a hint of English to it. And, gin has got rich heritage in England, and the name stuck. I like it. We have a cowgirl on the front, and that's our Montana Abbey.
That's fantastic. Okay, and this is potato?
So we do. When I make our gin, first I make our vodka, and then I proof it back down to 50 proof, and I feed it back through our still. So it's been made into 190 proof neutral spirit, and then it comes back and goes through, and I do all vapor phase extraction from all my botanicals. So I love
me some vapor phase extraction. That's my favorite kind of extraction right there.
Well, as opposed to a bathtub style gin where you soak the botanicals, this is all going through as a vapor.
But that gives it deeper, more complex flavors.
Absolutely.
I was being silly, but that's one of the benefits, is the flavor literally molecularly is infused. Do I have that right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you get different flavors doing it that way. You get, I think, more of the aromatic light things and not so many of the heavy, bitter, bold things.
Yeah.
And I think good gin has to have some bitter in it. Don't get me wrong, I think that's important, but what we're really trying for with this gin is it should be bright, it should be fruity and botanical, and we use elderflower and lemongrass, and we do rose hips, and I won't give you all of it, but but those are some of the flavors that are forward. But we also do fresh citrus. The bartenders in the front, or the mixologists in the front, don't really like it when I make gin because I need to zest almost a box of oranges and a box of lemons. And I can't do all that by myself, so we get to have a little zest party out in the front. And, I'm a particular guy, especially about my gin, and so I'm pretty particular about the quality control on the zest. It's like, oh, you're getting too far into the pith there. We're going to have to tone that back a little bit.
But it pays off.
But I think it pays off in the gin. Yeah, this is probably our spirit that I'm the most proud of.
Yep, and, okay, I'll taste it. I'll drink it. You tell us what it tastes like.
So I think that on the nose, you get some of those florally things and some of the citrus. You can pick that up. I think you also get the elderflower there. it can be a little not fair. So when I have people try things a lot, I don't want to tell them what to taste, because I think taste is a unique experience and everybody gets their own.
Yep.
But this is a podcast and you guys aren't here with me, so I'll tell you what I taste.
We
in
want
it.
them to come here and taste
Yeah,
this and
absolutely.
go home with a bottle. If you love gin, you need to come have this. So what do you taste?
So I taste up front some of the citrus and the sweet, and then it moves into the elderflower for me. And that lemongrass starts to cut through a little bit. Lemon and lemongrass are pretty similar flavors.
Yep.
But lemongrass has got a little bit more
Herbaceousness.
Yes, absolutely. And then as you move towards the back of your palate, you start to pick up some of the, we use grains of paradise, which is a close relative of black pepper, but it doesn't come through as bitter as black pepper does. And then you end with some juniper hanging in your mouth. And I love strong juniper gin. Give me Beefeater, but I also love gin that's like this because I think it gives you so many more things you can do in a cocktail. What you mix it with and the bitters you add will help you express different parts of this flavor palette. And so, it's certainly not Beefeater. It's not a punch you in the face kind of gin.
Have you ever had Big Gin out of Seattle?
I haven't, no.
That's like punch you in the head, and I love that. But you're right. I mean, there's not as much. I love it. Don't get me wrong. I love that gin, Captive Spirits. But there's not as much you can. This has a little more flexibility.
Absolutely.
And it's still amazing.
And I think down the road I will maybe come out with a Navy strength gin that's really aggressive.
Oh yeah.
And that's
now
that's
we're
the thing.
talking.
I like the idea of putting a little bit of Szechuan pepper in it. Really get
wow.
aggressive. But for the time being, when we were coming out with a first gin, I wanted something that complemented the potato spirit, and that our vodka has just a little bit of creamy and a little bit of sweet in it, in a way that not all grain vodkas do. And we wanted something that would showcase the quality of the potato booze and give us all of the botanical goodness that can be gin.
Now, I may be crazy, and tell me if there's some scientific reason or I've just lost my mind, but this feels like a very soft mouthfeel.
Right, and I think our vodka is the same way, that it's almost buttery on your palate.
Yeah.
And then adding, so I think gin often feels that way because there are flavor oils that come through. And I said vapor phase extraction earlier, I'm going to say it again. As you do that vapor phase extraction, you pull oils out of stuff, and those are the flavors that you taste. And that those things hang in your mouth and coat your palate, and it makes it feel soft, but it also gives you hang time on the flavor in your mouth.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, and what is it? What does my friend Jennifer Oregon Coast Wasabi say? It's a hydrophilic molecule. Am I right?
Some of them are.
Yes.
Some of them are.
Well, but if you have that, if the hot sauce is hydrophilic, and I'm butchering the terms, your mouth won't suffer. It'll go away.
Right.
But if it's not, if it's oil-based, that heat stays for a long time.
Absolutely. And actually, some of the very first iterations of gin that we made, I had way too much botanical material in there, and it came off the still clear and looked great. And when I went to cut it to bottle proof, so I distilled the gin at about 180 proof. So when I went to cut it down to 80 to bottle it, it got cloudy. There were too many oils, and so they're soluble in the ethanol, because ethanol is more greasy, and so you can get hydrophobic things to dissolve in the ethanol. But then you start adding water, and they come out of solution as oils, and they kind of crash out. So I had to pull back the yolk just a little bit on that. Too much flavor.
Yeah, and the reason she knows that, I know that because wasabi, real wasabi, she goes real wasabi in the Oregon coast. It's hydrophilic. The water dissolves the heat. The heat is amazing, but then take a drink of water and it'll pass.
Right, as opposed to regular hot sauce with capsaicin or a lot of these chili oils.
Yeah, those are oils, and those coat your taste buds. And if you're for my wife,
suffer.
You love to just sweat when you eat. So eat some hot things. If me, you think you're gonna die.
I used to think I loved hot things, and then I worked with a Chinese woman at the university here, and she made food that was a level of hot that I'd never experienced before.
So how do you like to drink this gin? You love gin. I love gin. How do you like to drink it?
So honestly, if I have access to good tonic, bitter tonic that's just mostly quinine and not sweet, I'll make gin and tonics. When I go out places, I drink a lot of gin and soda with a lime, because I want to let the gin shine. I don't want to cover it up with something else.
And you don't want to put some sugar in it.
Right. I don't want it to be sweet, and I want to taste, especially because I'm going to read about their gin later, so I want to know what I taste in it. And the soda really lets you do that. I mean, you can drink gin on the rocks too, but that's a quick way to end your night in a hurry.
Well, and you get a rich meal like around here. It'd be steak and potatoes. You have that with a nice gin. It actually cleanses your palate. Absolutely. It cuts it out. You can then and then you're ready to, because if you just eat steak and you have something similar, it doesn't cut the fat. And pretty soon you don't realize it, but you're not tasting the steak.
Right. Well, even drinking whiskey, sometimes you just get your palate's so saturated because it's so many of the same things over and over.
Yep.
But something bright and clear like a good gin.
Yep.
Really helps you. Yeah.
Exactly. All right, man. I'm just enthralled. I'm a huge fan. And Jeff, is out of state right now, and so now I have to come back to Bozeman again, I guess. Because I'd love to do a podcast with Jeff, get his journey, because his journey is different than yours. But Brooks, it was so awesome to get to have you on the podcast and tell your story. And I love what you guys do. I love your products, and man, just I wish you all the success in the world.
Oh, thanks. It was my pleasure.
And people, Bozeman, just look it on your app. You need to come to Bozeman. And when you're in Bozeman, you need to come down here and get yourself a couple bottles, have some drinks, do some Instagram, do some Facebook, take those bottles home. And then people in Portland, the way our system is set up, you can go in the liquor store and you can have them order it. And, they'll order it in, and Brooks will get an order and say, wow, they must have heard about it on the podcast. And he'll ship out some Montana Abbey gin or some of your raspberry vodka or your Bin 7 wheat whiskey. You're willing to ship to Portland if the state calls, state of Oregon orders it.
If I get an order, I'll fulfill it. Sales are sales. And Oregon is a place that is near to my heart in that way, because there's so much craft and there's so many people that are interested in where things come from.
Yeah.
And so we'd be happy to send you a slice of the Gallatin Valley.
Yeah, I like that. A slice of the Gallatin Valley. That's good.
One of our taglines that we use all the time is, we grow good times.
Yeah, because you guys grow everything that goes into this glass.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. It's farm to glass instead of farm to glass instead of farm to table.
We like to say grain to glass.
Grain to glass.
Yeah.
All right, I like that. All right, well, wish you all the best. Thanks. Cheers, everyone.